there's a quote from an Israeli diplomat, Addis Eba, that said that men behave wisely only once they've exhausted every other alternative. And I think that summarizes us well. So what we're doing is locking ourselves into a system where we're always buying and consuming and raping and pillaging in order to keep an idiotic system running for no apparent reason, just because the Joneses are doing it too. And that's what we have to move away from. If you're interested in living in the middle of the road, you're going to actually have to fight for it, because it ain't going to be here without that. And so this is a call to try and shake you out of that, trying to wake you up to the pieces of yourselves that led you to do what you do, to follow your path that you ended up following. But you can change, you can focus, you can alter. We can all learn, always, throughout our lives. So what I would say is, even if you have to just make small little micro steps towards being aware of what's going on around you, start making those steps, crack open those doors, and hopefully don't allow them to close again when the inertia of life comes over you and makes you just get stuck in the day-to-day rubbish of living. Get on with the big picture. Look at the point. Wake up.
It is a wake-up call, and we are just as much responsible as anyone else, and there's great wisdom from the past that carries us, and this is again a question of reconnecting, and that we really gain new values and live more into the force that created us and the planet in the first place, which is the force of love, which is what we are actually surrounded by, but that we don't take much notice of.
For me, this is about the end of the patriarchal model. And I mean that in the worst sense of the word, where the patriarchal model is based on command and control ruling, force and violence, rather than trust and inspiring, rather than it being decentralized, rather than being community orientated, and societally putting the health and well-being of people and planet first. And you can see it with these big transnational corporations and the corruption of political power today, that it's kind of the last gasp of the dying dinosaurs, with a huge amount of noise playing out before we actually really begin to understand the new dawning, if you like, the new light. It's already coming through. It may be just at the margins and the cracks, but we're in there. We're already. It's happening. We're part of this, and you know, we're stepping into that place more and more and more.
We've turned ourselves into service-based economies where we create fictitious things like call centers, like insurance, like financial services, and they are fictitious. They are based upon human-made things. They don't matter when it comes down to survival, ultimately. They are a luxury of an advanced bureaucracy. And if advanced bureaucracy falls apart, they mean nothing, and they disappear. To a great extent. Not entirely, but to a great extent. And then real skills start to come back into play. We are animals. We have to remember our civilization is something we built on top of something which is much deeper. And that deeper, deep-seated survival mechanism will kick in if things get difficult, and the humans will lose so much of this lovely thing that we created, which is our culture. And that's what's at risk here. And that's the scary bit. We can solve this by applying ancient wisdom.
The earth is really asking us constantly, please tap into me, take your wealth from me. It's priceless. I give unconditionally. So every seed that we plant is like a portal to the earth. You know? And the earth want to really ooze all this wealth. But we have to know how to make that connection. See? So we know how to make a connection with the bank. They may accept your application or reject it, and then you still have to worry for the rest of your life to pay back, you know, with interest. And here we are constantly, you know, it's like a fountain. See, but the fountainhead, you have to open it up and it will come out. Abundance. It's abundance.
90% of the energy we spend as human beings is in some form or way chasing money. It is so sick. What people don't realize is that this money thing and the control of money has infested and infected every crevice of our being in levels that we cannot begin to comprehend.
We are at that pinnacle moment. We have the decision now. Do we evolve? Do we manage this situation, or does it manage us? Because if we do not change our systems, if we do not alter our economic systems to start measuring value when it comes to the ecology, the natural systems that support us, the sustainability of our environment, we will have that system pull us right back down to earth.
See, today's farmers, they are cash croppers. They are not farmers. Although well-meaning and hardworking, they're just merely a part of an economic system. See, and that system doesn't care about quality of life. It's a system. It's like a computer. See, so. And of course, when the people are educated, indoctrinated to go along with this carelessness, see, then of course people become part of the farming, you know, of the earth in a corrupt way, and people become corrupt. I mean, everything as today is a completely corrupted way of life. And we may say this is part of the great plan, maybe, you know, the great chaos, so order can rise from it. Nevertheless, we have the first responsibility towards the Creator and creation, everyone else, is to fulfill the plan that brought us to this planet Earth.
When it comes to city environments, urban environments versus rural, I see the increased urbanization of the world, which right now we're over 50% of the world's population lives in cities, as being a temporary thing that happened in humanity's history. It can't continue. It won't continue, because cities, when you have real problems with energy and food and water, are the first places to fall apart.
It's only out of unity will you get infinite diversity.
And when you look at bigger cities like Mexico City with 29, 30 million people, or many of the other cities in China, which are bumping up against that, they're completely unsustainable. They're completely artificial, and nature doesn't do that. That's a good example of monoculture gone mad. And so, as the future progresses, I see the urbanization as being an interesting blip in a lovely graph.
It's going to take a little bit of introspection. It's going to take some time. It's going to take several stages, transitional stages. We can't go from zero to hero overnight. And I must make that clear.
So the government officers and the government representatives and the MPs need to learn about what is reality in front of their faces so that they can guard and protect the people they represent. And they're not doing that, because everything's based upon a voting cycle. Everything is based upon, I won't get elected in if I say something that people don't want to hear. So what do we end up with? A bunch of yes men hanging out with each other, saying things that everybody else wants to hear. Is that how we lead ourselves? Is that how you teach your children as a parent? By only telling them what they want to hear? This is complete and utter ignorance in the extreme. So, yeah, unfortunately, our systems of democracy today are anything but democratic and anything but logical, because they are not delivering what we need them to deliver.
When you are given great honor to serve as a leader, or opportunity, it also includes great responsibility. And that responsibility is not the responsibility to a mechanical system.
And our wisdom is what's lacking here. It's wisdom we need more than anything in the world. It's not more intelligence, it's not more intellect, it's not more technology. And I'm speaking as an environmental technology specialist. It's not a techno solution. This is a social solution. This is a wisdom solution. This is about understanding what is worth it and what is not worth it, what is value and what is not valued. We don't have that one right yet.
If anything, what we're doing in the Western world is we're playing catch up with the indigenous world. You know, we're the ones that kind of forgot the so-called developed world has yet to catch up with where the ancient wisdom is, and it's a rebirthing, if you like. It's a return to a deeper understanding, a deeper wisdom. Yeah.
Now that sustainability is the highest science on the planet, and who are the high scientists of sustainability? It's the indigenous peoples. We lived in the same places, controlling our populations, controlling our activities in such a way where we can live in the same small, what is now being termed fragile landscapes for thousands of years without destroying it. We have the technology, we have the science for living in right relationship with the earth.
Is what we're doing sustainable? And that's not a judgment. It's just an observation. Is it sustainable or isn't it? Can we do this forever or can't we? If we don't want to pass anything on to our children, then let's carry on. We're doing a fine job. We won't have anything to pass on to our children. But if we do want something to pass on to our children, then we need to radically change. And it doesn't matter how rich anybody is. We've only got one earth to live on. We can't go anywhere else. There's nowhere else to go. And what's wrong with this one? It's fine. We could stay here forever if we just chose to live in harmony, in a sustainable way.
Growing food, for example, with the Mayans, we did this years ago, and they took the flower of life and then broke it up into the six circles around one and planted herbs according to their colors in those circles, according to the way that they understood color. And those flowers exploded. Plants that usually only grew this big were growing a meter high. And they just went, they all loved being in that pattern and growing it. And it was obvious. You could just see that that was not a normal thing, but because of the shape they were put in, it changed it.
So what I would say is great examples of ancient knowledge are the Mayan and Incan and, well, in many ways, Thailand, Bali, Vietnam, Laos, all these old ways of understanding terraced agriculture, which were amazingly advanced with very little inputs once they were set up. There's a lot to learn from that. But if you want to go back far enough, even if you wanted to look at the British agricultural system 200 years ago, there's a lot of things we need to learn from.
I may take, if I plan it this way, I may take maybe 4 days a week to plan it all. Now, what is a week? See? Compared with days and days and months, people spending their time, their waking hours on front of the TV, drinking beer, talking nonsense, chit-chat, whatever it is, go to the bar, go to the movie, and then spend at least 40 hours a day, a week, right, making a living at the expense of life. So all these hours, they hate the work, and they have to make the money so they can buy the groceries and spend hours and hours, right, every month shopping. So all those hours, right, including paying your bills and laying down in the hospital for your illnesses as a result, it's a waste of time. You could have spent wisely, live longer, live happier, live healthier, and have a good relationship with the earth, with the universe.
So Imagine a community, a town of 1,000 people, and each one of those people is required to work for 3 hours a week on one of the community projects. That's 3,000 hours a week on community projects. There is no municipality or town council in the world that can afford to pay 3,000 hours salaries per week. It's not possible.
I, for one, am spending a huge amount of my resources now on learning basic skills. I want to learn how to make things, how to grow things, how to store things, how to prepare things, because that's what I see as being very important. I'm teaching my children how to forage for food and how to survive in the woods. And I don't see this as extreme survivalist. I see this as completely mainstream. This is common sense for those that are wise enough to pay attention to what's going on.
So the reason I started LifeWorks was because I believed that there were solutions and they had to be looked at in a new way. But with that, I applied all my business knowledge as well to that, so researched. And when we found them, and amazing solutions there are, applied the business rigor to those, to identify a sustainable long-term solution that has a track record. And out of all of that, outstanding winner was microbial science.
You cannot save seed from hybrids. That is the problem. That is a difficulty. And so there we have no access. So there a gardener, a farmer has no access to saving his own seed from those. And that is also a reason why we do seed saving, and why we encourage farmers and gardeners to save their own seeds, and why we, as biodynamic gardeners and farmers, breed our own varieties. We do not want to work with hybridization, because hybridization is a monopoly as such.
Memory means link. It's a link between the present and our origin. See? Now, in the cosmic sense, the Creator, some people call God, it is the origin, the oneness. But within the present economic system, the origin is the one who controls the monetary system, who controls the system. So it's a different origin. So therefore, the memory, the link has to be changed in order for that God, you may say, or that controller, to be empowered. See? So, and that God, you may say, that inferior God, has a system that must take over or supersede the cosmic system. So our relationship with the Creator has to be changed. So the seed, that is that catalyst, see, with our Creator. And so in order to enter that matrix, see, we must change our cellular memory. And for that reason, we have so-called genetic manipulation. And eventually, the whole human had to be changed too, had to be also terminated. And that we call as cloning. So we can fit in within that artificial world.
Well, microbial science is the foundation of nature. It underpins everything. Soil. There's in our stomach, for example, there's 2.5 kilos of microbes that do all of the foundation work. And then from that, our whole digestion and all that work. And it's only in the last 20 years or so that we really have grown to understand this science. And it is the reason it's exciting to us, and we chose it, is because it's harnessing nature in its optimum and working with man and nature to arrive at many, many solutions of our chemical industrial world.
The quality of the soil is not only important of the mineral composition, but also the life within the soil, the bacteria, so the microorganisms. because the microorganisms are important to change, see, the inorganic into organic. And so change is the only constant of life. So with the microorganisms, even when the soil is so-called depleted, but with the microorganisms, we can create the minerals that the plants need. And that's more important than just adding minerals to the soil. But
Fuck.
Find as when microbials are applied to a farm, the animals love it, the farmers love it. They say, why didn't we know about this 50 years ago? Because not only does it sustain the soil, you need far less water, far less irrigation. The quality of the water running off the farm is much higher. Everything thrives in a natural, it's harnessing nature with a greater understanding to work together with it.
the microorganisms in our body that we can create with the stimulus of our nervous system, but also with our actions, with our doing, walking, talking to the earth will respond. See, and life, primitive life will respond to microorganisms. So this is very, let me say, good soil. And it's that good, it can become better by caring.
And of course, deep care comes from the heart. It's a heartfelt place. And that's where we see ourselves as trustees of the earth, guardians, stewards, rather than property owners. And of course, when we're coming from a place of deep care, where we view ourselves as trustees, then we're looking 7 generations hence. We're looking to the future. We're not just looking at the bottom line. How much is it in it for me? And in fact, we move away completely. We shift away from that place of self-aggrandization, if you like, where we're putting ourselves first. And instead we look to the collective community. Instead of significant harm, how do we create harmony? So it's a very different space altogether when we work from the heart.
So in order to maintain that connection to one another, we need to strengthen the voice of women. We need to make it clear that around the world, at the grassroots, they are the pioneers. From Tibet to South America, to the UK, to my native country of Sweden, it is very clear again and again that it's the women who are leading the way. Let's make that visible. Let's bring it out so people can see that.
Everything needs to change. There's so much energy in the sun, there's so much energy in the water and the earth and the wind. There's no need to pollute the earth, and I think that the consciousness is developing. I remember when I was young, there was no such thing as the word ecology. I met a man named Cesar Chavez, and he was telling the people, don't use pesticides, it's going to kill you, don't alter the seeds, And this was back in the 60s, and I remember when he was saying that, a lot of people, they looked at him in disbelief, And now, so many years later, even the children in school are being taught, we need to take care of the earth. We need to have an economy that's sustainable, that's not ruining the earth. And
a biodynamic farm is essentially it's a self-contained farm, and we follow a philosophy that was proclaimed at the beginning of, it was proclaimed by a person called Rudolf Steiner, who gave a series of lectures in Austria to some farmers who needed some help because they could see a lot of things going wrong. And so he gave a lot of guidelines on how we should be farming. The basis behind what he proclaimed was to bring us back in touch with nature and not to let us slip away into a sort of egotistical, wealthy, greedy manner of farming.
Predominantly right now we have a
acceleration and increased growth that we can find in plants and also in human beings even nowadays, or in animals. So to balance that, we really need to find substances and remedies, which we have in biodynamic approach to agriculture, that enhance and balance that incredible growth rate that we can observe right now.
So at around Michaelmas time, we collect mature manure, or manure from mature cows, put it in the horns, fill it right up. These horns are laid in the ground at about a foot to 18 inches. And with the silica, we do the same with the silica, but the silica is ground up, mixed with a little bit of water so it becomes a paste, and it's also filled in the horn. This silica substance aids this process of the plant, maturing it, ripening it, and giving it the extra quality of light and warmth that we actually need strongly in our nourishment. The horn, and the hairs, and the fingernails is all made up of silica, and this gives a certain sensitivity. Like you could say that the microchips in modern technology, they discovered that silica has this ability and sensitivity as a mediator. And that is what we make use of here as well. We either dull our consciousness or we strengthen and we heighten it. And as we all have responsibility, or we should all carry responsibility for our own lives and for the planet we live on, and also for those who need caring, this needs mindfulness, this needs consciousness, this needs physical strength, and the food that we have today does not provide that. And so the biodynamic method offers really a nutrition that can cater for that. Growing food, I like to sometimes also to include the spirits or the elemental beings, so to speak, those of the elements of whether it's fire spirits, whether it's air spirits, the spirit of the air, the undines of the water, and the gnomes of the earth. They are all our helpers.
How do we plant water? See, how do we plant fire? See? And so, same as we plant a seed in the ground, we must also, our consciousness must also carry, see, the other elements. And that's why the preparation, before we plant, we have a prayer. And we call in all the elements and all the spirits and energies. See, that is called cosmic protocol, cosmic politeness. Yeah. So if you go into the bank and just come there, without manners, they just chase you out. They don't get a loan.
Some of the plants that really help us in our journey cannot be also overtaken, like you taking and taking and taking. For example, the tobacco. If you want to have a tobacco, imagine if you have only one tobacco plant, and then you go and say, oh, that's great, I got my tobacco. Then you need some leaves for your medicine to prune the smoke out. Then you get the leaves, then you need some hoska, then you prepare this other medicine with it, then you need some ambil, then you prepare another medicine from it. So what happens is the plant is getting really weak. And by the way, when it flourishes, then you get the seeds too. This plant is hardly gonna take all that. So in another way, which is being passed on to us, is the way of having, for example, in the case of tobacco, to have 4 at least. To have one that is the one that is the guardian of the other 3. So that one is never touched. So when we have the first plant planted, it's good to create a good relation with that plant, because that plant is going to be like a mirror for you of how the others are going and how your life is going. It's like the main communicator you have. The second one could be the one that you take the leaves from. The third one, you can get some of the leaves to prepare some of the other medicines, and then the fourth one will be only to take the seeds from the flowers. So in that way you keep a balance with them, you keep a good relation with them, and whenever each one of them is feeling a little bit sick, you can ask yourself, what is going on with this medicine? How am I using it? Why is this plant feeling like that?
I think something happens when we lose touch with our inner wildness, our ability to connect deeply with nature. I just heard the other day about here at Schumacher College, they've got some little chicks, little ducklings, that have come from an incubator, because that's how you acquire your ducklings today. Because ducks don't make good mothers, because we've domesticated them so much. And in fact, the best mothers are the ones out in the wild. They know how to ensure safety and survival at the very highest level. So maybe this is also about how we've become incredibly domesticated in all senses of the word, and how we've over-domesticated nature as well at the same time as ourselves.
We've been looking at quick, sharp outputs by getting animals these days that are designed to produce volumes of milk or food. And the compromisation of that is we've created monocultures, which are incredibly dangerous. Nature doesn't create monocultures. Our modern agriculture says we want maximum outputs for maximum inputs. What we have to do is switch this to maximum outputs for minimum inputs. It's the other way around. The pesticides, the herbicides, the fertilizers, the antibiotics that are necessary to keep our modern agricultural system running are not sustainable.
So if we don't invest in what is priceless, in ourselves, in the land, then our life becomes very costly. Obviously, life has become very costly, including insurance, the mortgage and everything. And what you end up in the end is collapse of the monetary system, and you don't even know what to do, because you have become dependent on an undependable system. So it's time to wake up.
So some of the pros of living in a building such as this Earthship that I'm sitting in front of are that it's manufactured out of a lot of waste materials and recycled materials. So the amount of embodied energy in this building is vastly less than a normal equivalent building. Also, it's obviously very highly insulated, so therefore it requires less energy in the first place to keep it warm. And that's part of the energy hierarchy. You start with removing the need for energy, and then you produce the energy in the most efficient way possible. So this building has reduced its need for energy by being a passive structure that is highly insulated. So that means passive-wise, it gathers huge amounts of its own heat from the sun. So when the sun comes through these windows in the wintertime, and they heat up the hard stone floor, and they reflect the sunlight back up off the floor inside the structure, it ends up cascading heat and light in the building naturally without any external input from fossil fuels. And then also there is some energy generated on site through a wind turbine and through solar panels and a solar thermal system. So there is electricity generated, and electricity is one of the biggest challenges because it's actually relatively easy to make renewable heat. It's actually relatively expensive and complex to make renewable electricity. So this building is producing some of its own, well, actually all of its own electricity right now because it's not grid connected. Because when you have a passive renewable systems like solar panels or a wind turbine, you're reliant on nature to produce the energy whenever it does, which isn't necessarily when you need it. So having a backup active system like a generator, it enables the building to move into a much more holistic, well-rounded use parameter. It can then be used all the time. So some of the other buildings that fall within the sustainable construction realm are things like straw bale buildings, which is very similar to an Earthship, except for it's obviously made with straw bale. They can look very similar to this because they generally have an external finishing. that enables them to be protected from the external environment. So straw bales, a really interesting design methodology, although it has to be built properly to stop any form of water ingress and any other animal or insect life getting inside it, because it will compromise a building. But that said, it's quite easy to do if you build it properly. Within sustainable constructed buildings, there's a lot of other things to discuss, like the windows, the glazing, the finishings on the inside with natural materials. There's a lot of buildings these days that are being finished with carpets and furniture and paints that are releasing volatile organic chemicals into the building for many, many years. And there is a lot of evidence showing the direct link between illness, especially things like asthma, allergies, with that increase in the decrease in the quality of the air inside buildings. Ironically, the air quality inside of a modern, brand new building can be 10, 20 times worse than outside the building.
This for me is really about being in service to something greater than the self. What that is, I'm not entirely sure. But I certainly know, and I feel it very deeply, that there's something greater at play here. And when we see ourselves in service to something greater than the self, then it's not about profit. Of course it's not about profit. It's not about what's in it for me. It's about allowing myself to be put to good use in this time, in this world.
All the ancient cultures have a form of Ubuntu. They call it by different names, but when you break it down, they all talk about the same thing. Communities that work as a unified community of individuals for the greater benefit of all the people in that community. And for that, you don't need money. Money does nothing. People do everything. People plant the food. People build the rockets. People solve the mathematical equations. People have the capacity for infinite love. Money does nothing. Money, all that money does is create the obstacles and the hurdles from people from attaining the food and the technology and the infinite love. Money gets in the way of everything. It is the absolute tool of control and the obstacle to all progress. The sooner we realize it, the sooner we can get ourselves out of this money matrix. So the only way to get over this is to get rid of money. There can be no other way. And that is the way that I suggest as a brand new way for the future. Not just a repetition of the same mistakes. A complete moneyless society. I call it contributionism.
As a geographer who studied demographics, I'd say we have no chance in getting to that, because our systems are going to fail before we get anywhere near close to that. In an economic system, one of the best things we could do is create a dual or triple currency model, where you have a local currency that is very much about local exchange. You have a national currency, which is about exchange with other places and other regions in your country. And then you have an international exchange methodology, so you can buy and sell things around the world.
The money doesn't have to be the primary driver. When the money is there to support your lifestyle, and certainly that's a big part of it, is maybe adjusting your lifestyle and not buying all the shit, then you can have a much more balanced and hopefully comfortable life.
In the last 10 years, the Earth has only produced as much food as it requires 5 out of 10 times. We've basically broken even most of the time. We've overproduced a couple of years and we've underproduced a couple of years. That's with a population of roughly around 7 billion people. The Earth is barely feeding itself. When you add in climate change, which will affect our sea levels, which will affect our weather patterns, which will affect our precipitation and our temperatures, you start increasing the variability within the natural food production systems to such an extent that you are going to be compromising huge percentages of that food. And that is an incredibly scary place. Here in the United Kingdom, we produce maybe 45% of the food we need. That's an incredibly dangerous position to be in. And we've only got a couple of weeks, if we're lucky, of backup storage. That's it. And it's an insane situation to be in.
This is very much about flipping the paradigm. At the moment, we view Earth as a thing, and when we do that in legal terms, that means we treat it as a piece of property, its ownership. We can use it, we can abuse it, we can do whatever we like with it, and then just abandon it. However, when you view the Earth as a living being, It fundamentally shifts your relationship. Rather than imposing a value, a price tag, if you like, on Earth, who can buy it and sell it, who can put it under contract, who has rights over, quite literally, the air. Instead of that, what you do is you actually fundamentally shift in legal terms to trusteeship law. And so that's about us becoming stewards, seeing ourselves as trustees, acting from an altruistic place on behalf of future beneficiaries and future beneficiaries whom we may never meet as well. That's very important here within trusteeship law. So you're looking to the greater good of the wider community of the future. And so this is really about flipping that paradigm. And law has a very powerful, is a very powerful tool to do that.
And permaculture is a design system, which means you have optimum outputs for minimum inputs. It means it's lazy gardening. It's basically saying, let's do the least amount we can to get the most out. So you're planting plants to help the other plants near them. They fight off each other's pests. They support each other. They produce each other's nutrients. This is what nature does. We're learning from nature with a permaculture-based system, but permaculture is a set of tools, and those tools can be applied to business, they can be applied to government, they can be applied to anything. And I see permaculture as offering the best toolkit out of anything else ever invented by humanity. Because permaculture is learning from ancient, but it's also learning from new. It's also evolving quickly and adapting. And it allows individuals who become permaculture designers to be able to apply it in their own unique way wherever they happen to be. And that is what makes it amazing. It's not about hierarchies. It's not about domineering. It's not about certification. It's not about stamps of approval. It's about applying a set of principles to everything you do that make logical wisdom sense. And that's what we can do. So if I can give you one tip, permaculture is the best thing we can ever apply right now for the future.
If you plant rice, you make it 10,000 seeds. That means 1,000,000% profit margin. How much do you get when you plant a piece of gold or a piece of plastic? Okay. So with the true economy, plus this seed, when it's stored, is properly stored, you can last for at least 10,000, 5,000, and 50,000 years. Okay. Now, money, constantly you have to keep up the value by illusion, by making wars, by manipulation, by competition, killing, and so on. While the seed you can store your money, still valuable, and you can multiply it anytime, and you can eat it.
I think this is the whole vitality of seeds is an interesting question. It is very interesting to realize that from the Egyptian pyramids, they sowed the seed they found there, and it still had a germination viability after that time.
I love permaculture, the whole concept of value the marginal, because that's the most amount of biodiversity occurs. And it's the same with big ideas. You know, they start out in the margins, and then because of the biodiversity and the energy around the collective intent, it starts to move in and becomes the new center stream.
The Steiner biodynamic system is something that very few people really understand. And I think there's a huge lack of understanding and there's a huge ignorance about it. But I would also say the same thing about permaculture, but permaculture is growing very, very quickly. And here in the UK, we've been lucky because they've got a really modern permaculture diploma program, which is all about practical applications of design. And I'm enrolled in that right now because I'm seeing that as a sustainability specialist as being the place I need to focus. I need to learn how to do real things with my hands in order to achieve sustainability in the real world.
Give the land back to the people. And let people live free on the land.
Kids who grow up on farms around dirt tend to have far less allergies and far better immune systems than kids that grow up in healthy, clean urban environments, which leads us to start to understand that what we perceive as healthy and clean isn't healthy or clean. There's a famous quote from Bill Mollison, the father of permaculture, who said that untidiness is natural order, and tidiness is unnatural disorder disguised. And that's something that we have grown to understand in the wrong way. We think that a garden should be manicured, have short grass, have edges of borders, of plants that don't do anything other than look good. The reality is we should be thinking about nature on a perspective of multi-output, so that everything does at least three things. Our plants should be producing food, they should be creating beauty, they should be creating environments for biodiversity. They should be doing a lot of things for us. And our ancestors 500,000 years ago all knew this, and every village had food growing all over the place. There were hedges, there were trees, there were nuts being grown everywhere, and every normal person knew what they were and when they came out. We also used to understand medicinal plants, but today we've lost that knowledge and we instead go to pharmacists and doctors to heal us. And I think a large portion of the future is going to be having to bring that back in-house, having to learn some things internally.
For those instances like MRSA where viruses are a problem and these virulent strains break out, it really is because we have misunderstood the whole microbial world. Through our science of pesticides, killing, we've killed off huge families of microbial families that have a key function, and it's put the whole system out of balance of nature. So what happens is these strains take hold and there's nothing to balance them out. When you understand microbial science and correct that, it restores it back and you will never have a problem of virulent strains, I believe.
Of the first hopi corn crop on this land, we made 2 medicines. The first medicine that's about using the moon cycle, the 4 phases of the moon. And the first phase is the purification. It came from the blue corn here, from the corn silk. And the second medicine was from the white corn, because it's the Hopi white corn. They also have the white and the red. The white corn, that is the awakening. And the third one was the remembering from the blue corn. And the fourth one from the borage that grew wild next to the corn last year. That's about courage. So we need to purify first so we can be awake, and then we can remember. Then once we remember, we see how difficult it is to make that step, to make that choice. It needs courage. So we made vibrational medicine, like homeopathic medicine, but not exactly. That is available now. So they can take 3 drops a day and to stimulate that, that cycle until we can make that choice, the courage.
Microbial science is a tremendous solution and a natural solution to many problems in developing countries. Across the board, water, animal health, human health, and farming, agriculture. Sustainable, truly sustainable, very empowered locally. It can be found and sourced locally. For example, we've been running this now and using it in a large community of 500,000 people in southern India. And across the board, the water with waterborne diseases and high levels of has cleaned up. The smells have all cleaned up. The growth in soil and agriculture has been 4- or 5-fold, and all been independently witnessed and observed by an agricultural institute and college.
So, what I would say about the places that I think are going to be best suited towards the future, they are going to be countries with low population densities. They're going to be countries that can feed themselves and water themselves and ultimately power themselves.
Change. That's the law.
The Transition Town movement, I believe, is a very good example of a movement to try to coalesce something behind, moving ahead and beyond where we presently are in our fossil fuel-based systems.
So The transition movement was started by Rob Hopkins, and he's very clear that there is no blueprint, there is no fixed plan. We're figuring this out, and we don't know if it will work. But we're going to have fun while we do, and we know that if we wait for governments, it'll be too little, too late. But if we do it on our own, it'll be too little. But if we come together, there's a chance that we can make it through. A transition initiative is one where the community or parts of the community even are coming together to respond to the changes that they see, the challenges they see of peak oil, in particular, the limits, the end of affordable, cheap fossil fuel energy, of climate change, of economic dislocation, and to begin the process step by step of moving away from those ways of doing things into a more resilient community, and at the same time creating more happiness. And it recognizes both the need to learn new skills and new ways of community, and recognizes also the inner transition as well, that we need to change our attitudes and our thinking, and to really handle the changes that can be disruptive, can be traumatic as well, and how to handle that in community. Loss of employment, loss of skills, loss of value, and so on. The potential dislocation is very high, and we need to recognize those things. But at the same time, having a vision of where we're going and that actually life could be better. And so using those skills that the community have, rather than just experts coming in and telling you what to do, the community needs to look to what are the resources that it has, and how to build those connections, because we've given away our authority, we've given away our empowerment to others to do all of these things to us, and we now need to retake those things as those systems become not so reliable. People know maybe the people who live next door to them, but how many people know the people 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 doors up from where they live? We've lost that connection through having entertainment in our own homes with a television, and the ability to jump into our cars and drive off somewhere. You know, we can work here, we can have our entertainment here, we can have our friends here and here and here, and so we don't need to know the people beside us. But if something happened to those systems, we would need to rely on those people. So we need to build those connections so that when we need each other, we actually have something to build on, rather than living next to people for 5, 10, 20 years and never even knowing their names.
Where everybody contributes their God-given talent or their acquired skills to the greater benefit of all. So no money, no barter, no trade, no value attached to anything, where everybody contributes their God-given talents or acquired skills to the greater benefit of all in their community.
Governments need to look to find ways to devolve more authority to local communities, but really to face up to the issues about energy, because that's what is, and also to the whole model of business as usual, because all the time we hear getting back to growth and the growth economy, but it's the point is very soon going to be reached. We cannot go continually extracting minerals out of the ground, turning them into stuff, shipping them around the world, having them in our hands for a few minutes, and then chucking them back into landfill. That is a system of life that cannot go on for much longer. It really has its limits. We have to find new ways of living that actually enable life to continue for thousands of years and not for decades or handfuls of years in the model, the system that we have now. Something really interesting is happening on the planet. In my lifetime, the population of the planet has tripled in size. I mean, it's unprecedented. Something amazing is happening. It's either heading to something, or we could say, maybe we're all here now. Maybe we're all here on this stage right now for this event that is about to occur. We're all here for this shift of consciousness. Really interesting that maybe we'll reach a tipping point where there's enough consciousnesses alive on the planet actually for that sense of separation that we experience as a daily experience to trip over into a point of connectedness, simply because there are enough consciousnesses there. So how that shift occurs, how the shift from the Dark Age to an age of enlightenment occurs, can either be smooth or it can be rough. And because the shift is occurring, and whether we're able to take the most of the opportunity will depend on what we do. There's an opportunity. It's up to us how much we seize that opportunity, and that is dependent on how we come together, how our level of consciousness is, whether we're able to move from a purely functional mind, intellectual thinking, into more of a heart thinking, more of a connection thinking, and an awakened thinking of enlightenment. The more that we're able to do that, that transformation, that transition from the industrial growth system to an age of enlightenment will be smoother. The roughness there can be smoothed by people coming together, groups of meditation, and to really shift consciousness and to connect together.
The true meaning of the word to be a lawyer is to be a healer of the community's woes. And for me, that's really about the wider Earth community. So you don't need letters after your name to be a lawyer.
Many of our education systems now are designed around the worst ways of learning, which is just copying things. Then you move up to a higher level of learning, which is re-representing things. But the ultimate highest level of learning is teaching. So what we need to be doing is getting all of our students, be they children, be they adults, be they old age pensioners, constantly learning and teaching each other on an ongoing basis. That's how we can evolve and grow. So we're in a position where we can power and heat our houses and even cool them in many ways through natural ventilation systems, through active technologies. And we have national grids still, but they provide a backup secondary role. So communities become more self-reliant. Then they also, in my dream world, would become much more self-reliant on food and much more self-reliant on education as well as healthcare. They start to learn from the past about what it is necessary in order to develop quality in your life. And having a resilience built into all those systems means that if you do have widespread crop failure somewhere, then other communities can help you. We can grow food, we can produce clean water, we can built-in resistance to natural systems that enable us to handle the diversity of challenges from the environment to a certain degree. But the biggest variable is the human element. And how do you govern is a massive challenge, because the systems of equivalent non-hierarchical roles tend to be more advanced when it comes to dealing with problems, but they also tend to suffer from lack of leadership, and they suffer often from lack of inertia. You tend to lose the action, let's do something, because it's management by committee. Managing by committee generally leads to banal mediocrity.
Install what I call a council of elders, people that we as a community appoint who are the most respected and wise individuals in our community, not some political appointee that's running a council that's doing it because they're getting payola from some invisible banker somewhere because they want to develop lands and develop shopping centers. So this is the first thing that needs to stop. Appoint our own council of elders in every community.
It's easy to talk like I'm talking now. It's very easy. And you can impress with great speeches. But like the Hopi say, I don't care how much you know, or how many diplomas you have, how much money you have, unless it can grow corn, doesn't mean much.
Change is going to come. The only question is how far we're able to embrace that change and transition into a way of living which will actually sustain life on the planet and actually could be a happier and healthier life at the same time. That's the question, is how are we going to be happy and fulfilled for all of the people on the planet? That's the question that we have to face, and that really is in denial we're not facing up to.
It's about legacy. What do I choose to do with my skills and my life, my unique gifts, that I bring to bear? How do I choose to best put them to best use? And I'm not just looking, to benefit next generation or even 7 generations. This is about looking forward into the future of infinity. What do I choose to do here and now with my life that leaves a legacy for all beings, for all time?
All around the world, there is this great awakening going on. We're coming home. We're coming back to our home in nature and in closer community to one another. And this is how I see this worldwide movement being what I call ancient futures, in that we're learning from ancient indigenous cultures what it means to actually live more embedded in nature and with one another. We're waking up to the incredible joy, the love, and just the happiness we get from that reconnection to one another and to nature. In every field, from medicine to architecture to agriculture to the economy, there is a new movement where we wake up to what does it look like to base our life on love and connection rather than fear and separation. And I would say that the area that is the sort of latest, that is getting a lot of focus recently, is the economy. And what I promote is what I call the economics of happiness. And that is the economics of connection. It's the economics of localization. But that localization is not in isolation. It's part of this global movement where all around the world people are waking up. People are coming home. People are coming to the economics of happiness.
So we're going to enter a time of abundance where there will be true gifted economies and sharing that will enable a restoration of ecosystemic magnitude unheard of before, or of times gone by. And so I think that we're in very exciting times, and it's not for us to wait for this to happen. This is for each one of us to step up and do now, to take self-responsibility, for each one of us to become a radiant, loving being, for each one of us to step up to fulfill our roles of being human on this earth now and act as part of this living biocircuitry of this living matrix we call the earth.
So welcome back, and I hope you enjoyed A Sustainable Future. I mean, whoa, there's so much good stuff in there, isn't there? The whole way through. And thank you again. If you'd like to comment and you want to share it with us, either do it on the Facebook comments page below, or you can go to the Facebook page, Time of the Sixth Sun, the movie, and comment there. And I would just please ask you not to reply with these beautiful comments saying thank you to us on the help email, because it means that we're just filling up that help email inbox, and it's so many more to go through every day. So let's talk a little bit about the package, because we have this digital package available and a physical package available. So